What's going on, guys? My name is Arrow, and today I'm bringing you a very interesting Juggernaut build that could use some work. Before we get started, if you like my content, like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let the YouTube overlords know that my content is worth watching. Alright, so the Juggernaut. I had an idea for the build before the league started and theorycrafted a bit with a friend of mine. We wanted to use the new helmet Echoes of Creation, but couldn't test it. So I had to build it in league and see if it worked. The core of the build centers around this Echoes of Creation helmet, which has a big upside and a big downside. The helmet gives more damage per Warcry exerting each attack. However, it also gives you 15% of life taken as fizz for each Warcry exerting the attack. Originally, we planned to use the Eternal Apple shield to automate Warcries, but this ended up requiring far too much investment for what we got back. So, why Juggernaut? Well, two reasons. One, I wanted to play a Juggernaut. There hasn't been many good reasons to play it over the last couple of years, but don't worry, reason number two is a better reason. Juggernaut's Unbreakable Ascendancy passive allows us to recover 1.5% of the physical damage that we've prevented in the last 10 seconds as life. My belief before the league started was that this would apply to the damage we take from the helmet based on the wording, and it works. The more we use exerted attacks, the more self-damage we do, and the more health we recover. In order to mitigate all that damage that we're taking from attacking, we needed a massive amount of physical damage prevention. We start with tons of armor, we have about 160k in combat, as well as a bunch of flat physical damage mitigation from endurance charges and a few other sources. On top of this, I wanted to take further advantage of all that self-damage, so we're using Divine Shield. This keystone allows us to regenerate energy shield based on 3% of the physical damage that we prevented recently, similar to the Juggernaut Ascendancy, which recovers life. We combine this with the Aegis Aurora shield recovery on block for energy shield, and we get our block from the shield combined with Iron Fortress's block chance per strength, which leads me to my next point. How do we get damage? This was a huge problem because we invested so much into our survivability, we just didn't have a lot of points or gear left in order to get our damage out. Because we used a shield, our weapon had to be a one-hander. I quickly discovered that one-handed slams are not great. We just lack base damage. So after some theory crafting with viewers, we settled on Brutus's Lead Sprinkler. Speaking of viewers, I stream on Twitch every day, by the way. Link in the description, check me out. Strength stacking would allow us to get big base damage. Further, strength stacking allows us to use Battle Mage's Cry with Iron Will. Battle Mage's Cry, a war cry, we're going to be spamming them anyway, might as well use it. The Battle Mage's Cry allows us to get increases in reduction to spell damage to apply to our attacks at 150% effectiveness. We then use Iron Will to allow Strength's inherent damage bonus to apply to spells, which Battle Mage's Cry then converts back to attack damage. The new boot affix from Recombinators allows us to get an additional 2 to 4 fire damage per 10 strength, on top of the 4 to 7 that we already get from the Sprinkler. Combine this with a bunch of rares with percent and flat strength, and we're able to achieve a very clunky 10 million DPS or so. In fights, you have to use your Warcries constantly, and when things line up, the damage is huge. And when they don't, the damage is bad. Lastly, on the damage front, because we're a Jugg, we can use Forbidden Jewels to get Warbringer from Berserker. This gives us a huge amount of damage and rage generation. Warbringer gives us rage when we Warcry, and we end up with pretty good uptime on around 25 to 30 rage. If you can find a button on your keyboard after all these Warcries, Berserk adds a massive amount of damage. I actually have it linked to cast when damage taken at the moment because I simply didn't have any keys left. We also have 100% uptime of the 50% more damage multiplier from this node because we're constantly using Warcries. So that's how our damage works, but there's still more interactions that this build has that I want to share with you. I know, I probably went a little bit overboard on the mechanics, but that's what happens when you theory craft your own builds. Remember how we have an Aegis Aurora and Divine Shield, but we don't have any energy shield? That's where my favorite jewel in the game comes in, Glorious Vanity Doriani Edition. This provides Corrupted Soul, which grants 15% of life as extra ES, and that gives us a huge pool of ES to work with. This jewel also splits incoming damage between your life and ES. So in combat, we are effectively able to regen both sources at the exact same time, meaning all of that recovery that we're getting for life and ES are usable at the exact same time. The last thing I wanted to discuss were some masteries that bring this all together. Since we're spamming Warcries like crazy with this new helmet, we can get a lot of power out of the Warcry masteries. For offense, we take the mastery that grants 20% increased damage for each Warcry that you've used recently. We're using 5 or so per second in combat, so this gives us tons of increased damage. For defense, we take the mastery that grants recover 15% of life when you use a Warcry. We slam all 5 of our Warcries in a row, we recover 75% of our life in less than a second from doing the thing that we were going to do anyway in order to do damage. This allows us to not even need to use a life flask. Let's talk about the skill that we chose. We're using Earth Shatter with the extra fissure helmet enchant because the fissures can overlap on a boss, and I thought that might be the best way to do single target damage, and we can swap out some gems for clearing and mapping and then use things like concentrated effect on bosses. It's okay, I don't love it. I think Ice Crash might actually be better for bossing. I did some PoBing, and it looks like you can get around 15 million damage with our current setup, just switching over to Ice Crash. So that might be the better version of the build, but haven't fully tested it. In conclusion, don't play this build. At least don't play this build as it is. It's an incredible amount of investment for a not that amazing return. We were able to kill all the regular bosses in the game, and it kind of maps, but it just doesn't feel great to play. However, if you are an experienced Warcry stacker or melee player, maybe this video inspires you to try out the new helmet. The goal of this video was to share out all of these interesting mechanics that I got to work together, and hope that maybe somebody who actually knows how to play a slam build can take this idea and make it better. The current POB will be in the description, but don't follow it exactly, unless you have tons of exalts to burn. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, take care.